The chamber fell silent as the holographic display showed the final moments of Colonial Expedition 379. Screams echoed through the speakers, while massive shapes tore through reinforced hull plating like paper. And then nothing but static remained. Marcus Webb stood before the Galactic Council with his hands clenched behind his back, watching council members from 40 different species recoil at the footage he had witnessed firsthand. The Vrin representative covered all 6 of its optical sensors, while the Catherine delegate's scales shifted to deep purple. A color Marcus had learned meant pure terror. Witness Webb, the council arbiter's translator, crackled, a crystalline form pulsing with agitated light. You claim these creatures demonstrated coordinated hunting patterns. Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. They communicated somehow, he said, keeping his voice steady despite the memories clawing at his mind. The attacks weren't random, they isolated our strongest fighters first, then collapsed our defensive perimeter from 3 sides simultaneously. A murmur rippled through the council chamber. The Zelthorian war chief, a being whose species had conquered 12 star systems through military might, slammed one massive fist against his console. Impossible. No beast possesses such tactical cognition. They're not beasts, Marcus interrupted, earning shocked looks from the assembly. They're apex predators with intelligence we don't understand yet. We went in treating them like animals to be controlled. And they responded accordingly. The Arbiter's light pulsed red. You defend the creatures that killed 347 colonists, including your own research team? Marcus felt the familiar weight settle on his chest, the weight of survivor's guilt, the weight of knowledge no one wanted to hear. I'm not defending the deaths, he said quietly. I'm explaining that we were the invaders. We landed in their territory with weapons active, cleared their hunting grounds with plasma fire, and expected them to run. They should have run. The war chief roared. Our weapons are superior. Our technology unmatched. Tell that to the 3 expeditions they wiped out. Marcus shot back, surprising himself with the venom in his voice. The chamber erupted in arguments. Species debated in languages that Marcus's translator struggled to process, creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, growls, and harmonic tones that made his head pound finally. The Arbiter raised all 4 of her primary appendages. Order. We will vote now. The motion is to declare Kepler 442's Crimson Belt a Category 5 death zone, with permanent quarantine protocols and no future contact. Marcus watched the voting display. One by one, every species voted in favor unanimous. 40 species, thousands of years of combined galactic experience, all agreeing that the Crimson Belt was beyond salvation. Any retrieval missions for lost equipment or cultural artifacts are hereby classified as acceptable loss. The Arbiter declared, this zone is dead to galactic civilization. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear, but a strange sense of clarity. These beings, for all their advancement and wisdom, saw only danger. They looked at the Wren Claws and saw monsters. When Marcus saw something else entirely, something fierce and magnificent and wildly misunderstood, you are dismissed. Witness Webb, the Arbiter said, her tone softening. Transport to the quarantine processing station has been arranged. You will receive full psychological counseling and compensation for your trauma. Marcus nodded mechanically and turned to leave. No one noticed the small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. 3 days later, Marcus stood in the evacuation shuttle bay as the final ships prepared for departure. Around him, traumatized survivors huddled together, speaking in hushed tones about the nightmares that would follow them across the stars. He had volunteered for the last transport, claiming he needed time to gather research data from his damaged equipment. The harried evacuation coordinator had barely glanced at his credentials before waving him through now. As the shuttle engines powered up for the final launch, Marcus slipped away from the boarding queue. He moved through shadows between cargo containers, his heart pounding not with fear, but with anticipation. His pack waited where he had hidden it 2 days ago. Emergency rations for 6 months. Water purification tablets, a portable fabricator he had accidentally tagged as destroyed. Medical supplies, and most importantly, the bioelectric scanner he had been developing before the attack. The shuttle's engines roared to life. Marcus watched from behind a supply crate as the last civilians lifted off. Their faces pressed to windows as they took final looks at the world that had nearly killed them. He waited until the engine sounds faded completely, until the sky showed only stars and the twin moons of Kepler 442 before he moved. His hands found the emergency beacon in his vest pocket, the device that would summon rescue if he activated it, and he calmly dismantled it. Piece by piece, scattering the components across the landing pad. No going back now, he whispered to himself. But there was no regret in his voice. Marcus shouldered his pack and turned toward the dark tree line where the crimson belt began. Somewhere in those shadows, the Wrenclaws were watching. He could feel their attention like static electricity on his skin. Could sense the bioelectric fields that his scanner was already detecting. He thought of his daughter, Emily, lost in a space station accident 3 years ago while he had been on yet another expedition. He thought of the empty apartment waiting for him on Earth. The unopened messages from concerned friends. The therapy sessions that never helped. He had nothing left to lose and everything to learn. As Marcus walked toward the tree line, his scanner picked up the first distinct bioelectric signature. Massive, complex, moving parallel to his position. Not attacking, just observing. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said aloud, knowing they couldn't understand his words, but hoping his tone carried meaning. "I'm here to understand." The jungle swallowed him as the first moon rose higher. Behind him, the empty evacuation zone stood silent. Ahead, in the darkness, amber light pulsed between the tree's eyes, or something like eyes. Watching the strange human who walked alone into the place where others fled, Marcus found the crashed supply ship right where the expedition records said it would be. The hull was torn open on one side, but the opposite compartment remained intact. He spent the first hour of nightfall reinforcing the entrance with salvaged plating, creating a barrier that could be sealed from inside. As darkness fell completely, the sounds began. Low rumbles that vibrated through the ground. High-pitched calls that seemed to come from all directions, and beneath it all, a rhythmic pulsing that Marcus's scanner identified as coordinated. Bioelectric communication. He sat with his back to the reinforced wall. Scanner in one hand and a makeshift weapon in the other. Not to attack, but to defend if necessary. Outside, massive shapes moved through the underbrush, circling his shelter, testing, learning. Marcus smiled despite the fear coiling in his gut. "Day 1, he murmured, watching the scanner display light up with more signatures than he could count. "Let's see who's really the apex species here." The night was long, filled with sounds that would have driven most humans. 17 days had passed since the evacuation ships left, and Marcus had filled 3 notebooks with observations that would have revolutionized xenobiology, if anyone in the galaxy cared to read them. The Wrenclaws, as the previous expeditions had called them, were far more complex than any report had suggested. Marcus watched from his reinforced observation post as a pack of 7 moved through the clearing below, their 6 legs carrying them with a grace that seemed impossible for creatures weighing over 600 kilograms each. Their crystalline sensory organs, what earlier reports had mistaken for simple eyes, actually covered most of their heads in geometric patterns. Marcus's scanner showed these crystals pulsing with bioelectric energy, creating fields that the creatures used to communicate and sense their environment. He sketched frantically as the pack's alpha, a massive female with silver-white crystals, raised her head and emitted a pattern that Marcus's scanner translated into complex electrical pulses. Immediately, two younger pack members broke off and began circling what Marcus now recognized as territorial boundary markers. "You're not just hunting," Marcus whispered, his breath fogging in the cool morning air. "You're organizing, planning, teaching." The Alpha's head swiveled toward his shelter. Marcus froze, knowing his bioelectric signature was different from anything else in the zone. For a long moment, they regarded each other across 50 meters of dense jungle. Then she turned away, dismissing him as neither threat nor prey. Not yet decided, Marcus spent the next week modifying his scanner, turning it from a passive receiver into an active transmitter. If the Wren claws communicated through bioelectric fields, then he needed to learn their language or at least stop broadcasting confused alien. With every heartbeat, his first attempt at contact was nearly his last. Marcus stepped into the clearing at dawn, scanner modified to emit what he hoped was a peaceful pattern. He had studied the juvenile signatures when they played, at isolated frequencies that seemed to indicate non-aggression. 3 Wren claws materialized from the underbrush faster than his eyes could track. The Alpha was not among them. These were younger males, territorial defenders, and they did not appreciate the strange biped invading their space while emitting garbled nonsense. Marcus barely made it back to his shelter. Claws scored the hull plating as he sealed the door, leaving marks that cut through metal like soft wood. His hand shook as he checked his scanner. He had been transmitting at the wrong frequency entirely, essentially screaming a challenge he didn't intend. Stupid. He berated himself, downing water to calm his racing heart. "You're thinking like a human. They don't use sound, they use fields. Frequency isn't pitch, it's meaning." He spent 3 more days recalibrating, this time watching how the electrical patterns layered and interwove. It wasn't a simple language of discrete signals, but a complex tapestry of overlapping fields that conveyed emotion, intent, and information simultaneously. His breakthrough came on day 24. A juvenile Wren claw, smaller than the adults, but still massive by human standards, approached his shelter alone. Her crystalline patterns shone amber gold in the afternoon light, and her bioelectric signature radiated curiosity rather than aggression. Marcus watched through his reinforced window as she circled the shelter, occasionally pawing at the hull with surprising gentleness. His scanner showed her field was simple, uncomplicated, the signature of youth and wonder. He made a decision that was either brilliant or suicidal. Marcus opened the door. The juvenile jumped back, her crystals flashing through rapid color changes. Marcus stood very still, scanner in hand, and activated the new pattern he had developed, a simple field that he hoped conveyed openness and non-threat. The juvenile tilted her head, crystalline sensors focusing on him with intensity. Then she took one cautious step forward. Marcus's heart hammered, but he maintained the field, adding what he hoped was a welcoming frequency. The juvenile took another step, then another, until she was close enough that Marcus could see his reflection in her amber crystals. "Easy," he murmured, knowing she couldn't understand words but hoping tone mattered. "I'm not going to hurt you." The juvenile sniffed at him, or did something like sniffing, her crystals pulsing in patterns that Marcus's scanner interpreted as sensory investigation. Then she made a sound, not electrical but actual vocalization, a low rumble that vibrated through Marcus's chest. He laughed, surprising himself. "Yeah, I'm weird, are I? Different species, different signals." The juvenile's field shifted to something that felt almost like amusement. Marcus decided to call her Ember, for those amber crystals that seemed to glow from within. Their interaction was interrupted by a deeper rumble. The Alpha emerged from the tree line, her massive form radiating authority and warning. Ember immediately lowered her posture, submissive, but she didn't retreat from Marcus. Marcus kept his field steady, non-threatening, but not submissive. He wasn't part of the pack hierarchy, and he suspected trying to act subordinate would only confuse things. The Alpha studied him with an intelligence that was almost human in its intensity. Marcus felt like he was being evaluated, measured, categorized. Then, to his shock, the Alpha emitted a complex pattern that his scanner struggled to interpret. It felt like a test. Marcus responded with his peaceful patter, adding layers he had observed in parental interactions: patience, curiosity, desire to learn. The Alpha's crystals flashed once, twice. Then she turned and walked back into the jungle. Ember bounded after her, but not before looking back at Marcus with what he could only interpret as interest. "Tomorrow," Marcus said to the empty clearing. "We try again tomorrow." And they did. Over the following weeks, Ember became a regular visitor. She would appear at dawn or dusk, always alone or with one other juvenile. And Marcus would share processed food rations that she found fascinating, if not particularly tasty, in return. She tolerated his presence, allowed him to scan her bioelectric patterns up close, even seemed to adjust her signals so his human brain could process them more easily. Marcus learned that she was the Alpha's daughter, that her pack consisted of 11 individuals, and that they were engaged in a territorial dispute with a larger pack to the east. He learned that the crystalline sensors didn't just receive light, but interpreted electromagnetic fields across spectrums humans couldn't naturally perceive. The Renclaws experienced reality in dimensions Marcus could only translate through technology. He learned that they mourned their dead, celebrated successful hunts with complex electrical harmonies, and taught their young through direct field pattern transmission, the ultimate form of communication, bypassing words entirely. And most importantly, he learned that they had been watching him since the day he arrived. The Alpha had designated him as unknown study, a category they apparently reserved for things that were neither food nor threat yet. 43 days after being left alone in the death zone, Marcus sat outside his shelter as Ember dozed nearby, her breathing slow and steady. Overhead, stars wheeled in patterns that no one in the galaxy would ever associate with peaceful coexistence. Marcus uploaded his daily notes to his personal database, knowing they would never be transmitted but needing to record them anyway. "They called you monsters," he wrote, "but you're just people, different people, but people nonetheless. The real question is, will you ever think the same about me?" Ember's crystals pulsed softly in her. "6 months transformed the crash site into something that would have baffled any xenobiologist. In the galaxy, a hybrid of human ingenuity and Renclaw territory that belonged fully to neither species and somehow to both. Marcus stood back to admire his latest addition, a water collection and purification system built from salvaged ship components, local crystalline formations that naturally filtered particulates, and a design inspired by watching how the Renclaws directed rainwater flow around their dens. "Not bad for a dead man," he muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead as the afternoon sun beat down. Ember chirped from her favorite resting spot, a flat rock Marcus had positioned specifically for her because she kept lying in his workspace. Her crystals pulsed with contentment, and her bioelectric field radiated what Marcus had learned to recognize as approval. The habitat had grown organically, shaped by necessity and observation. Marcus had reinforced the original shelter with local materials, a dense wood-like substance that the Renclaws used for their own dens, which proved surprisingly resistant to their claws when properly treated. He had built covered walkways connecting 3 separate structures: the main shelter, a workshop where his fabricator hummed constantly, and a storage facility that stayed naturally cool due to its position over an underground water channel. The Renclaws had watched his construction with fascination. They understood building, their dens were sophisticated structures with multiple chambers and ventilation systems, but Marcus's methods were alien to them. Just as their bioelectric coordination was alien to him, it became an exchange of knowledge. Marcus learned which plants were safe, which areas flooded during storms where the dangerous predators hunted. Yes, there were things even Renclaws avoided. In return, he showed them human tools, demonstrated cause and effect with simple machines, and shared food that none of them particularly liked but all found intriguing. The real test came on day 173. Marcus woke to Ember's distress call, a pattern of jagged electrical pulses that screamed danger. He grabbed his scanner and emerged to find the entire pack gathered near his habitat, their formations defensive and their crystals flashing aggressive red. Another pack larger, with 14 members, had crossed into the territory. The alpha female, whom Marcus had named Silver for her distinctive coloring, stood at the front line, her field radiating challenge and defiance. The rival alpha was massive, easily 20% larger than Silver, with dark crystals that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Marcus's scanner showed electrical patterns that felt like hatred made manifest. Territory disputes were common, Marcus had learned. Usually, they involved displays of strength, some minor violence, and eventual retreat by the weaker pack. But this felt different. This felt like the rival pack intended to claim the territory permanently, which meant eliminating the current residents. Marcus made a decision that changed everything. He stepped forward, placing himself between the packs, and activated his scanner at full broadcast power. The pattern he transmitted was complex, layered with meanings he had spent months learning to construct. This territory is occupied. Pack plus human strength in cooperation challenge us all. Both alphas froze, their attention snapping to him. Marcus felt like an insect caught between two predators, but he held his ground and maintained the pattern. The rival alpha's response came, swift and brutal, a field that essentially meant human prey, not pack. Silver's response was even swifter. She lunged forward, placing herself directly between Marcus and the rival, her field blazing with a message Marcus had never seen her use. Pack human, attack him, attack me. We are one. The rest of her pack flowed into defensive positions around Marcus's habitat. Ember pressed against his leg, her smaller form trembling but her field defiant. Marcus's chest tightened with emotion he hadn't felt in years. Belonging, protection, family. The rival alpha assessed the situation with clear intelligence. Her pack outnumbered Silver's, but the defenders had better position and the strange element of a human who somehow counted as pack. After a tense standoff that felt like hours but lasted only minutes, the rival pack withdrew. Silver didn't relax until they had crossed the territorial boundary. Then she turned to Marcus and emitted a pattern so complex his scanner could barely process it. Gratitude, acceptance, recognition of partnership, and something that felt remarkably like affection. Marcus dropped to one knee, suddenly overwhelmed. "I'm pack," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I'm actually part of the pack." Ember nuzzled against him, her amber crystals warm. The other pack members approached one by one, touching him briefly with their sensory organs, each transmitting variations of acceptance. That night, when storm clouds gathered on the horizon, Marcus opened his reinforced shelter, the largest space he had built, and transmitted an invitation. "Storm coming. Shelter available. Pack welcome." Silver studied the structure, her intelligence evident in how she examined entry points, ceiling height, and defensive positions. Then she made a decision that no Renclaw had ever made with a human. She entered his shelter, followed by her entire pack. Marcus worked quickly, bringing in stored food and water, arranging the space so 11 massive creatures and one human could fit comfortably. The Renclaws arranged themselves in their traditional formation, youngest in the center, strongest at the perimeter, but they made room for Marcus near Silver. A position of respect and trust. The storm hit with violence that would have terrified him 6 months ago. Now, surrounded by the warmth and bioelectric hum of his pack, Marcus felt safer than he had since childhood. They spent 2 days sheltering together as the storm raged. Marcus shared his processed rations, which the pack politely tolerated, and the pack shared their stored meat, which Marcus politely declined. But they shared space, warmth, and something far more valuable, trust, on the 3rd day. When the storm cleared and the pack emerged into sunshine, they didn't leave. They stayed. Silver designated an area near Marcus's habitat for the pack's primary den. The younger members began treating his workshop as an extension of their territory. Often dozing in patches of sunlight while he worked, Ember practically moved in, her favorite spot becoming a cushioned area in his main shelter, where she could watch him work and occasionally provide commentary through bioelectric patterns that ranged from curious to amused. 60 light-years away, a Galactic Council stealth probe completed its survey of the Crimson Belt quarantine zone. Its cameras captured imagery that would spark debates in every scientific institution across known space. A human habitat, sophisticated and thriving, integrated seamlessly with structures built by the most dangerous predators ever encountered. The human himself worked alongside Renclaws, neither dominant nor submissive, but cooperative. Juvenile Renclaws played with human-built objects while adults dozed peacefully nearby. The probe's AI struggled to categorize what it was seeing. All previous models predicted either human death or Renclaw domestication. This mutual partnership, this family structure crossing species barriers, simply should not exist. The data transmitted automatically to Council archives, flagged as high-priority anomaly on Kepler 442. Unaware of the galaxy's attention, Marcus Webb sat with his back against Ember's warm flank, watching Silver teach her youngest son the proper technique for electrical field modulation. They said, "You were monsters," Marcus murmured, scratching behind Ember's sensory ridge in a spot she loved. They said this place was uninhabitable. Ember's response pattern was simple and clear. Home, pack, safe, together. Marcus smiled. He had crossed the galaxy, lost everything, and found family in the Marcus first detected the ships 3 days before they landed, unauthorized signatures dropping out of hyperspace. Military-grade drives, corporate registration codes that his salvage systems could barely identify. No, he breathed, watching the scanner display with growing dread. No, they can't be coming here. Silver sensed his distress immediately. Her field shifted to alert concern threat query. Marcus showed her the scanner data, knowing she couldn't understand the technology, but hoping she would grasp the danger. More humans? He transmitted through his modified equipment, adding patterns of warning and potential violence, many more, with weapons. Coming here, the pack's response was immediate and organized. Silver sent runners to mark the boundaries, recalled 2 juveniles who were exploring beyond safe territory, and positioned the strongest adults in defensive formations. Marcus had seen them use only once before, but Marcus knew it wouldn't be enough. The ships landed in the old colonial clearing, the same place 3 expeditions had established doomed footholds. Marcus watched from a hidden observation point as troops deployed in perfect military formation, their armor gleaming, their weapons humming with enough power to level his entire habitat in seconds. A woman emerged from the command ship, her uniform marking her as executive class from one of the mega corporations that controlled half the galaxy's resource extraction. She surveyed the jungle with the expression of someone evaluating property value. "Establish perimeter," she ordered, her voice carrying through the clearing. "Deploy sensor nets, sonic barriers, and suppression fields I want this entire zone mapped and secured within 48 hours. Marcus felt cold rage building in his chest. They hadn't come to rescue him, hadn't come to study or understand. They had come to conquer, to extract, to exploit. One of the troops pointed at something in the jungle. "Ma'am, we're reading massive biosignatures surrounding our position. The creatures from the reports." The executive smiled. A predatory expression that would have made Silver proud in other circumstances. "Excellent. Activate the pacification protocols. Once we've neutralized the immediate threats, we can begin live capture for the research division." "Live capture?" another soldier questioned. The report said these things killed 300 colonists. The reports were from failures. The executive snapped. "We have proper equipment and understanding. Now one human managed to survive here for months. If he can do it alone, we can dominate with superior technology." Marcus's hands clenched. They didn't understand. They thought he had survived through dominance, through forcing the Renclaws to accept him. They had no concept of partnership, of mutual respect, of family. The first shots fired an hour later. A juvenile Renclaw, curious about the new arrivals, approached the perimeter. The sonic barriers activated automatically, emitting frequencies designed to cause pain and confusion in large predators. The juvenile screamed, a sound that tore through Marcus's heart, and fled. Silver's response was immediate and devastating. The pack attacked from 3 directions simultaneously, using tactics that human military strategists would recognize but never expect from animals. They targeted sensor equipment first, disabling the troops' ability to track movement. Then they struck at communication relays, isolating squads from central command. But the humans had weapons that could kill from a distance. Marcus watched through his scanner as the first Renclaw fell. A young male named Spark, who used to steal Marcus's tools to examine them. Plasma fire burned through his chest, and his bioelectric field vanished like a snuffed candle. Then another fell, and another. Silver fought like fury incarnate, her massive form moving with impossible speed. But even she couldn't dodge plasma bolts forever. Marcus saw the shot that grazed her flank, saw her stumble, saw the troops converging on her position. Something broke inside Marcus Webb. He had survived the death of his daughter through emotional shutdown. He had survived the loss of his career through stubborn redirection. But he would not survive watching his pack, his family, slaughtered by people who saw them as resources to exploit. Marcus emerged from hiding and did what humans do best when protecting what they love. He became dangerous. His first target was the communication array on the command ship. One precisely placed explosive charge, salvaged from old equipment and modified over months of tinkering, turned their coordination hub into scrap metal. His second target was the weapon supply depot. Turns out military-grade plasma cells become very unstable. When their containment fields are disrupted, the explosion took out 3 squads and created chaos in the command structure. Then Marcus did something that would make him infamous. Across the galaxy, he turned the Renclaw's natural abilities into coordinated military tactics using his modified scanner at maximum broadcast range. Marcus transmitted battle patterns to the pack. Flank left, Alpha and Ember. Draw fire while Stone and Claw circle right. I'll disable their shields. Strike when I signal. The pack understood. They had been hunting together for months, had learned to interpret Marcus's patterns, had developed trust in his judgment. What followed was a massacre, but not the one the corporation expected. Human soldiers, trained to fight rebellious colonists or hostile aliens in open combat, were utterly unprepared for coordinated attacks by superintelligent predators, guided by a human who knew every weakness in their equipment. Marcus sabotaged power cores, redirected sensor feeds to show false positions, and disabled safety protocols on automated defense systems. The turrets that were supposed to protect the troops, started firing on their own people when Marcus hacked their IFF systems. Silver led her pack with brutal efficiency. They struck from shadows, used the jungle terrain perfectly, and demonstrated why 3 expeditions had failed, because the Renclaws weren't mindless beasts. They were tactical geniuses who now had a human tactical advisor. The executive died trying to reach her ship. Ember, moving with speed that belied her size, intercepted the woman and transmitted a pattern that Marcus had taught her, the electrical equivalent of, "This is our home. You are not welcome." Marcus found the corporate recorder later that day, still broadcasting back to civilized space. He was covered in ash and blood, his eyes haunted but his voice steady. He stared directly into the camera and spoke words that would echo across 40 species' homeworlds. "You marked this zone as uninhabitable. You were right. But not because of them." Marcus gestured to where Silver stood. "Wounded but alive. You marked it uninhabitable because humans like you, who see everything as something to conquer or exploit, can't survive here. These beings, my family, they welcomed me when I came in peace. They taught me their language, shared their territory, protected me from storms and rivals. And you came here to capture them, experiment on them, treat them like resources." Marcus's voice grew cold. "I'm staying. This is my home. They are my people. And the next corporation, military force, or colonial expedition that tries to claim this zone will face exactly what you faced: intelligent predators and a very angry human who knows all your weaknesses. Leave, or become part of the ecosystem. Those are your only options." He reached forward and destroyed the recorder. But the message had already transmitted. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched a human standing shoulder to shoulder with the monsters from nightmare reports, defending them with the same ferocity they had shown defending him. The surviving troops evacuated within 6 hours, their casualties too high to justify continued operation. The corporate board would later claim equipment failure and unforeseen environmental factors, never admitting that one human and a pack of Renclaws had dismantled their entire operation that night. Marcus sat with Silver while Ember treated her mother's wounds with a natural antiseptic the pack used. 3 members of their family had died in the fighting, and Marcus felt each loss like a physical wound. "I'm sorry," he transmitted, patterns heavy with grief. "I brought them here, my species, my stupidity." Silver's response was gentle. "Not you, them. You are pack. They were other. You defended us. We defend you. This is pack." Marcus buried his face in his hands and wept for the dead, for the violence he had enabled, for the fact that protection and violence were sometimes the same thing. Ember pressed against his side, her field radiating comfort and solidarity. Around them, the surviving pack members drew closer, creating a protective circle around their human. They had won, but the galaxy would never forget, and more importantly, would never forgive that a human had chosen monsters over civilization. The Galactic Council's emergency session lasted 3 standard days, with representatives from every major species arguing about what to do with Marcus Webb and the Crimson Belt. He murdered 37 corporate employees. The Vrin ambassador insisted. Her 6 optical sensors focused on the display showing Marcus's broadcast. "This is a criminal matter. He defended his territory from armed invaders," the Catherine delegate countered. "Scale shifting to contemplative blue by galactic law. This falls under sovereign defense protocols." The arbiter, who had presided over Marcus's original testimony years ago, pulsed with conflicted colors. The zone was declared uninhabitable. He had no legal claim to sovereignty. Then charge him. The war chief rumbled, surprising everyone by defending Marcus. "Send your fleets, your soldiers, your weapons. and see if you fare better than the corporation did." Silence fell across the chamber. The reality was clear to everyone present. Marcus Webb had done the impossible, not just survived in the Crimson Belt, but thrived. Not just coexisted with the Renclaws, but formed a functioning multi-species social unit. And most terrifyingly, demonstrated that humans partnered with intelligent apex predators were more dangerous than either species alone. "We cannot allow this precedent," the Vryn insisted. "If one human can claim uninhabitable zones through partnership with dangerous species, then maybe we need to reconsider what makes a zone uninhabitable." A new voice interrupted Ambassador Kelleth. A Daltharian whose species was renowned for philosophical insight stepped forward. "We declared the Crimson Belt uninhabitable because we failed there. 3 times. We brought superior technology, weapons, and numbers, and 3 times we were defeated. Then one human, alone and unarmed, succeeded where we failed. What does that tell us about ourselves?" The chamber erupted in arguments. But eventually, a compromise emerged, one that would reshape galactic policy for decades. The Crimson Belt was redesignated. No longer a quarantine zone, but a sovereign sanctuary under the stewardship of Marcus Webb. No exploitation rights, no colonization attempts, no military operations. The zone was recognized as inhabited territory, with the same protections afforded to any planetary government. It was an admission of defeat, wrapped in diplomatic language, and everyone knew it. Marcus learned about the decision 3 months later when the first official contact ship arrived, broadcasting peaceful intentions and requesting permission to land. He stood in the clearing with Silver at his side and Ember sprawled behind them, watching the small diplomatic shuttle descend. His hand rested on a modified scanner that had become as much a part of him as any limb. The ambassador who emerged was Kelleth, whose philosophical nature Marcus appreciated when he reviewed the transmitted records. They met in the center of the clearing, 2 beings from species that had walked among stars for different reasons. Marcus Webb. Kelleth's translator rendered her harmonic tones. "I bring formal recognition from the Galactic Council. This territory is yours, protected under sovereign sanctuary laws." Marcus studied the official documents. Holographic seals from 40 species glittering in the sunlight. "I don't want ownership," he said finally. "I want protection for them. For this place, you have it," Kelleth assured him. "And more, you have become something of a legend. The human who chose predators over people, who built family from fear. I chose understanding over ignorance," Marcus corrected gently. "They were never the monsters we were, for not trying to learn their language." Kelleth's harmonics shifted to what Marcus interpreted as respect. "Many have asked, some who are outcast, lost, seeking what you found, permission to come here, to learn as you learned?" Marcus turned to Silver, transmitting the question through their shared language. Her response was complex: curiosity about other species, concern about territory, but ultimately trust in Marcus's judgment. "Small numbers," Marcus said. "Carefully vetted people who come to learn, not conquer, who understand their guests in someone else's home. I will relay your terms." The first arrivals came within a year. A disgraced Vryn biologist who had argued against the quarantine from the beginning. A young Catherine whose species had exiled her for refusing military service. A human couple who had lost everything in a war and sought peace in the last place anyone would look. Marcus taught them what he had learned: that bioelectric communication required patience and humility. That the Renclaws valued actions over words. That building trust with apex predators meant accepting you would never truly dominate them. Some visitors lasted a week before requesting evacuation. Others stayed months, learning languages without words, forming bonds across species barriers that galactic civilization claimed were impossible. The settlement grew organically, never becoming a colony, but evolving into something unprecedented, a refuge, where outcasts and seekers lived alongside Renclaws in mutual partnership. Silver's pack flourished. Ember, now fully grown, led her own hunting group and had 3 offspring who grew up treating humans as normal parts of their environment. The youngest, whom Marcus named Spark after the pack member who had died, considered Marcus's workshop a second den 5 years after the corporate attack. Marcus stood in his expanded habitat surrounded by evidence of successful coexistence, holographic displays showing bioelectric patterns, juveniles napping near power generators that hummed at frequencies they found soothing, and a communication array that connected the sanctuary to research institutions across the galaxy. He was recording his latest memoirs, knowing they would be studied in xenobiology courses for generations. People ask me how I survived. Marcus spoke into the recorder, his voice older but steady. They want technical details, behavioral analysis, scientific explanations, and I give them those things because data matters. But the real answer is simpler. I stopped surviving and started living. I stopped seeing them as subjects to study and started seeing them as people to know. I stopped thinking about what I could gain from them and started asking what I could learn with them. Silver's presence filled his peripheral vision. She had aged too, moving slower but no less commanding. Her crystals had developed deeper silver tones, and her bioelectric signature had grown more complex with experience. The galaxy called this place uninhabitable. Marcus continued. They were measuring habitability by their own standards, how much they could extract, exploit, control. They never asked if they could belong here, because belonging requires humility. Humans have a reputation in the galaxy now. We're the species that packs bonds with anything, that finds family in unlikely places. Some species fear that, others mock it. But I think it's our greatest strength. We don't just survive hostile environments, we learn to love them. We don't just coexist with dangerous species, we build families with them. And when threatened, we defend those families with everything we have. Marcus paused, remembering the blood and fire, the violence he had enabled to protect his pack. That makes us dangerous in ways others don't expect, not because we're stronger or smarter, but because we'll cross any line, break any rule, fight any battle to protect the ones we love. Even if the ones we love have 6 legs and communicate through electrical fields outside. Young Spark tumbled through the clearing in play combat with a Catherine, adolescent who had been with the sanctuary for 2 years. Their laughter one electrical, one vocal blended into harmony. An elderly Vrin researcher emerged from the library structure. Her optical sensors focused on a datapad showing behavioral patterns. She had spent 3 years studying pack dynamics and was preparing a paper that would revolutionize understanding of cross-species socialization. The human couple worked in their garden, growing earth vegetables alongside local plants that the Renclaws had shown them were edible. Their daughter, born in the sanctuary and now 3 years old, played with juvenile Renclaws without fear or hesitation. This was Marcus's legacy, not conquest or dominance but partnership. Not civilization imposing order, but different civilizations learning to dance together. Marcus closed the recording and stood, his joints protesting after hours at the console. Silver approached, her field radiating contentment and companionship. Getting old. Marcus transmitted with affectionate humor. Both old, Silver responded, adding patterns that meant shared history and acceptance. They walked together toward the clearing, where the pack gathered for evening communal time. Ember saw them coming and transmitted a greeting that made Marcus smile. She had learned to modulate her patterns specifically for human ears, creating sounds that were almost musical as twin moons rose over the crimson belt, casting amber and silver light across the sanctuary. Marcus sat among his family, biological and chosen, and thought about the long journey that had brought him here. He had come to this place broken, seeking only escape from pain. He had found purpose, family, And a home in the last place the galaxy expected. They said you were uninhabitable, he murmured to the jungle. The moons, the pack surrounding him spark. The juvenile named for a fallen friend. A mooner climbed into his lap despite being far too large, her weight warm and reassuring. Her crystals pulsed with simple contentment. Home. Pack safe, together. Marcus wrapped his arms around her. Feeling electrical patterns